Welcome to another episode of Discograffiti's wildly in-depth Beach Boys series and Your Dreams Come True, where Brian Wilson freaks like you and me get our chance to delve deep into the barely believable history and prodigious discography of my favorite band of all time, and also coincidentally the best, along with a slew of over 50 top-shelf guests, ranging from musicians inspired by their work, family members, documentary directors, songwriting collaborators, Beach Boys authors, producers, touring band members, and for good measure, some of the Beach Boys themselves. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow. Special thanks goes out to Jeff McAvoy and especially co-producers Dennis Dyken and Mark Freed, without whom this series would not have happened. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on the Beach Boys single, The Little Girl I Once Knew. And here to shed some light on why DJs wound up killing it, legendary FM radio DJ Pat St. John. And away we go then. Today's guest is an American radio personality and voiceover artist who's been called a walking encyclopedia due to his ludicrously prodigious music knowledge. Hey, my kind of guy. In early 1969, at the age of 18, he landed his first gig as a radio personality on Windsor's CKLW. Then, in April 1973, he began an almost 15-year stint on New York's WPLJ. For most of his years there, he was rated by Arbitron as the most listened to afternoon radio personality in America. He survived the station's transition from AOR to Top 40 in 1983 and left in 1987, returning to his rock roots on WNEW-FM. He became the station's program director in the early 1990s and moved to afternoons where he followed Scott Muni. After the demise of WNEW's rock format, he was one of the first programmers hired by CD Radio in October 1998 as the director of classic rock programming. CD Radio would later change its name to Sirius Satellite Radio, then later to Sirius XM, where he remains today as one of their most popular personalities. He wound up announcing for Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve from 2000 to 2010, and April 9th, 2013 marked his 40th anniversary on New York radio, making him New York's longest-running air personality. In 2023, he was inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. He and his wife now live in San Diego, where he broadcasts his 60s gold and rock and roll shows from a customized studio in a barn on their property, which sounds like a pretty slick and enviable setup to me. He can be heard on Sirius XM Radio, 60s Gold weekdays, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and Saturdays, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And to top it all off, his favorite band's the Beach Boys. Lads and ladies, his taste is obviously second to none, so I'm hoping he can explain why this single didn't hit number one. It's Pat St. John!
Yeah, that sounded pretty good. Can you repeat all of that, please? Hi, Dave.
Hey, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Oh, my pleasure. Get the chance to talk about the Beach Boys, and yeah, they're my favorite band. And, I'm happy to be with you here.
I'm really psyched for you to be here. I used to listen to, it was 102.7, right?
NEWFM, yes.
I came of age in New Jersey in the 80s, and I would listen to you and Scott Muni all the time.
Yeah.
Classic rock. And now I don't listen to radio anymore, but that was all I listened. I mean, that and 91.1, because with FMU, you never knew what you were getting.
Well, that's the fun. I mean, classic rock is pretty much the programmed version of a top 40. They're playing the same songs all the time, which I really got tired of doing. So NEW had much more freedom. Those kind of stations, you could call them progressive or freeform. Those are few and far between. I've done a lot of different formats. I was on our blues channel for many years, in addition to what I was doing. And I programmed that for a while because I love the blues. I'm kind of back to what I was playing on CKLW when I was a teen. CKLW was right across the river, the Detroit River. And that was the station I grew up on. It was a dream to get there. They should have never hired me at the age of 18 because I was so green, I didn't know what I was doing. But the guy who hired me saw me, and that's probably the most important station that I ever worked at. People call me all the time. CKLW was called the Big Eight. They were an AM 50,000 watt channel. The station could reach 5 provinces and 28 states. You could reach. I mean, at night when the signal was it would just boom. And it was top 40. And then the Drake format, which was tight and bright, just get in and get out in between those songs. It was very tight, and it became popular across the country on stations in different markets. Out here, it was KHJ in Los Angeles. Same format. And there were a bunch of them across the radio dial. So basically, those were the songs from the 60s. That's what I was playing then. That's what I'm playing now. And it's the most fun to me. And you can still discover things. And the Beach Boys are one of our most important artists. NEWFM, probably the most fun radio station I ever worked at. CK, probably the most important, although I worked at some pretty important stations, luckily enough. And I still love doing this so much.
It's funny. I used to maybe just have pretensions of going into that, although I was a DJ in college, but I never really went into what you do professionally. But I used to read and try to inflect my voice in certain ways when I was home alone, just reading books. And it's funny, now that I think of it, it was probably some kind of early underpinning of what I'm doing now.
Well, here's the important thing. And when I started at CKLW, only 18, working at a 50,000 watt radio station, I had only worked at my high school station when I was 16 for the last half of my senior year. Then I was an announcer on a beautiful music station in Detroit. That's how I got started. While I was there, I was sending these tapes to CK. Anyway, when I got to CKLW, I used to imitate the other guys, thinking I was doing this. And the thing is, the most important thing is to be yourself. Right. By just talking to you, you're very comfortable. You're on a microphone now, and you're speaking the way you speak. And that's the most important thing, is to sound like yourself. And it's very natural. I mean, you've got a very natural sound. You've got a great voice. And, it's a relaxed thing. You can still be relaxed and excited.
Yeah.
You think about a lot of these DJs on top 40 radio stations, and we always used to call them smiling pukers. But the same can be true for these progressive, laid back jocks. Hey, and they get into this. Hey, and it's the same kind of thing. Just be natural. Be yourself.
Yeah. So this is a first for Discograffiti. The show's been going for about 3.5 years, and I've never had a DJ on the show. And our mutual friend, Dennis Dyken, who, by the way, sends his undying love to you, he recommended, why don't we try Pat? And for this particular episode, I thought, oh my God, that's a stroke of genius. I've never had a DJ on the show. It's also a first because typically I do an entire career. But for the Beach Boys series, I've broken it down album by album, and this is the only episode ever that's about a song only. We're breaking all kinds of turf here. It's a very special episode about a very special song. However, this may be the only episode ever that Discograffiti does about a single song. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. It's a great song. It's a transition song. It's the first full song composed in a style that would become extremely important for Brian during and even prior to the Smile period, instrumental in fact. And lastly, because it was a failure. For the Beach Boys at that time specifically, it was a total tanking, in fact, although it's relative because it did reach number 20, which for some artists would be astounding. So, all right, last we'd seen our boys. Capitol Records was back, breathing down Brian's neck yet again and sniffing around for more product, this time for the impending Christmas season, which meant that yet again, the maestro's focus was going to again be yanked in a direction less valuable than where it was currently trained, which was his muse. But Party, the record, the Beach Boys Party, winds up being a brilliant way to deal with the situation, and he re-ensconces himself in his creative cocoon to deepen the relationship that he's building with a very specific and very illustrious muse. So the first date that is going to be of importance here, and this is going to be a truncated timeline. We're not doing a super lengthy timeline here. October 13th, 1965, 3 weeks after the Beach Boys party session's completion, Brian has a session for The Little Girl I Once Knew. All right, that concludes your free sneak peek into today's Patreon episode. If you want to hear the rest of it, just visit patreon.com/discograffiti and either purchase this podcast by itself for $4, or better yet, subscribe at the major tier and get access to Discograffiti's 4 weekly episodes. That's Friday's free episode, the Sunday Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound episode, which showcases Patreon members and the Elephant Six world, your Monday bonus episode, and your Wednesday early release ad-free super extended director's cut of that Friday's show. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and 6-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not supporting Discograffiti. Become a member so you don't miss a single thing at patreon.com/discograffiti.